She sat beside the CEO, took a deep breath, and dropped the bomb. She was pregnant. Twins. And they were his. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Ethan Montgomery had never felt so exhausted. He loosened his silk tie as he sank into the plush first-class seat, anticipating a few hours of precious rest. Outside, airport staff hustled beneath the fluorescent lights, loading baggage into the plane's cargo hold, while the intercom repeated instructions about carry-on luggage and fastened seatbelts. In those moments, the CEO of Montgomery Enterprises yearned for nothing more than silence. He had been attending back-to-back meetings in São Paulo, negotiating a colossal merger that could expand his company into new international markets. The barrage of phone calls, reporters, and urgent emails hadn't stopped until precisely 5 minutes before he boarded. Now, enveloped by the hum of the airplane's engines, he dared to believe he would finally get a break. Suddenly, the swirl of perfumed air announced the arrival of another passenger in his row. A flight attendant politely said, "Miss, here's your seat," indicating the spot right beside Ethan. To his surprise, it was occupied by a woman with hair pulled back in a low ponytail, wearing a simple yet elegant maternity dress. A faint smile brushed across her lips as she settled into her seat, carefully placing a small bag under the one in front of her. Ethan instinctively moved his briefcase out of the way. He had grown accustomed to traveling in first class alongside polished executives or distinguished diplomats, people who wore carefully chosen suits and exuded self-importance. But this woman radiated a different kind of confidence, serene, almost fragile, but unshakably resolute. She struggled a little to buckle her seatbelt around her pregnant belly. Without hesitation, Ethan offered assistance, feeling a gentle pang of concern or sympathy for reasons he couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she murmured, glancing at him with soft eyes. And just like that, they locked gazes. For a second, Ethan felt a peculiar déjà vu sweep over him. A voice broke the momentary silence. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the flight attendant began in a practiced tone. The cabin lights flickered, prompting everyone to check seatbelts and switch phones to airplane mode. Ethan took a long breath. He should have recognized her, maybe from a charity gala his company had sponsored, perhaps from a business conference or from one of the many social gatherings he'd been obligated to attend, but his memory was oddly blank. Once the plane began its taxi down the runway, the woman turned slightly to face him. Her cheeks were tinted with a subtle flush, as though she'd been waiting for the right moment to speak. "I'm sorry to intrude, Mr. Montgomery," she said softly, "but you may not remember me." Ethan's eyebrows arched in mild surprise. "We've met?" Her faint laugh was tinged with nerves. "Yes, you likely don't recall. It was 6 months ago in London after the tech expo your company hosted. We talked in the VIP lounge." The memory soared back like a lightning strike. He recalled a sophisticated after-party in a lavish rooftop venue, the swirl of champagne glasses and cold city air, flashes of a conversation on a balcony overlooking the Thames. And just for an instant, Ethan pictured it. He had indeed stepped out for a breather. He'd felt stifled by corporate talk and sly negotiations. And there was a woman, a warm smile in the midst of a chilly evening, a brief exchange that turned into an hour of heartfelt conversation. His lips parted in astonishment. "It's Sophie, right?" Her small nod confirmed it. "Sophie LeBlanc." He suddenly noticed a wave of embarrassment creep across him. That night, he had been so drawn to her honesty. While others had angled for business deals, Sophie simply offered conversation about life, about priorities, about how success can swallow a person whole if they're not careful. He vaguely remembered how the two, newly acquainted, left the event to walk along the nearly empty cobblestone streets, nightlights shimmering on the river. A gentle talk turned into laughter, and laughter turned into a moment of deep connection. so intense that it still made him uneasy when he recalled it. Some uneasy flicker in Ethan's expression must have made Sophie aware of his sudden tension. She tilted her head and quietly added, "You really don't remember everything about that night, do you?" His throat felt constricted. "I do recall we spent time together, yes, but to be frank, the details are a bit hazy." A faint turbulence rocked the plane, causing Sophie to place a hand protectively over her belly. "We ended up going to a small bar nearby. It was quiet, tucked away. We talked more about our lives." She paused, swallowing. "And eventually, we got very close." Ethan's face flushed. 1,000 recollections he had blocked out rushed to the surface. The bar's dim lighting, the last call for drinks, how they had ended up at a cozy hotel lounge afterward because the city's night had felt endless. It had been spontaneous, unexpected. And then both parted ways the next day, no talk about exchanging numbers, as if afraid to transform the magic of that single night into something mundane. He had buried that memory under piles of business documents and the relentless demands of his corporate schedule. For months he even questioned if it had been just a dream. But now reality sat right beside him. Sophie exhaled slowly. "I know you're a very busy man. I tried writing an email to your corporate address, but no one responded. I tried your office. Your assistants never let me through." Ethan rubbed his temples. It was not unusual. With each day, an avalanche of calls, emails, and requests smothered him. Many never even reached him, being filtered out by staff. "I'm sorry," he said, genuine regret painting his tone. "I had no idea. If I had known it was you—" She lifted a hand gently, quieting him. "I'm not here to blame you, Ethan. I need you to listen to me." A flight attendant approached with the standard tray of drinks, oblivious to the tense energy building between them. Ethan declined, and the attendant quickly moved on. Once they were relatively alone again, Sophie set a small envelope on Ethan's tray table. "These are ultrasound scans. I'm carrying twins." She hesitated, her gaze trembling but unwavering. "They're yours." Silence thickened around them, drowning out the hum of the engine and the idle chatter from across the cabin. It was as if they were sealed in their own dimension, while life continued a short distance away for other passengers, couples sipping champagne, executives watching silent business slides on tablets, families trying to calm a crying baby. None of them could possibly fathom the bombshell that had just shattered Ethan Montgomery's entire world. His hand hovered over the envelope without touching it. For a long moment, he simply couldn't speak. Everything he had planned for the next year, expanding into Asia, finalizing contracts, even shortlisting associates for top-tier promotions, now felt insignificant. Twins, his twins. Eventually, he cleared his throat, though his voice still came out strained. "You're certain they're mine?" Sophie's eyes flashed with hurt, but she spoke calmly. "I wouldn't lie to you about this. I've thought carefully about how to approach you. The night in London was the only time it could have happened. I haven't been with anyone else. The test results confirm it." She reached into the seat pocket in front of her, pulling out some neatly folded paperwork. With delicate movements, she slid them toward him. He scanned them. Paternity estimates, dates matching the timeline, references from her doctor, all meticulously documented. Ethan swallowed again. The seats felt narrower, as though the walls of the plane were closing in. He stared out the window, searching for stable ground even though they were floating thousands of feet above it. "Sophie," he began, but his own name caught in his throat. She answered the unasked question. "I'm due in just over 3 months. I couldn't wait any longer to tell you. I tried every avenue. Then I found out you'd be on this flight. I had to book a last-minute ticket. This was my only chance." Deep inside, Ethan recognized that her decision to confront him in person, on a plane where he couldn't vanish into phone calls or bolt to a boardroom, was both desperate and clever. She was ensuring he wouldn't ignore her again. He stared at her belly, the faint outline reminding him that inside, two tiny lives were growing. An emotion he rarely felt began to churn in his chest. Fear, but also a flicker of something else, an unfamiliar sense of responsibility and, dare he admit, a spark of awe. "Tell me what you need," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice from trembling. Sophie exhaled, her relief mixing with apprehension. "I just need you to know, because I can't do this alone. And I'm aware that you have your whole empire, your priorities, your public image. I don't want to upend your world, but you have a right to know, and they have a right to know who their father is." Before Ethan could respond, the pilot's voice crackled over the PA system, announcing some minor turbulence and instructing passengers to keep seatbelts fastened. In a sense, the slight shaking of the aircraft matched the internal quake Ethan was experiencing, the realization that everything he thought he controlled was now uncertain. A father of twins. That single fact would change everything, from his personal relationships and social standing to the future of his company if the news broke out. Sophie held up the ultrasound once more, her gaze firm. "I'm not asking for much, Ethan. We may never be a family in the normal sense, but I want my children to know who they come from. I want them to have a chance, and it's only fair that you have a role in their lives if you choose." He wondered if she realized how much her words struck him. As the plane rattled gently, Ethan found himself grappling with a question that had never crossed his mind. Could he become a father at this pivotal moment when he was on the brink of the most important merger of his career? From the overhead light, shadows danced across Sophie's worried expression. He forced himself to breathe. This was more than a moral decision. It was a collision of two worlds, the unstoppable force of business and the immovable bond of blood. Letting out a slow exhale, Ethan looked at Sophie with a new glimmer of something that might be acceptance, or maybe sheer terror. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "I promise you I won't run away from this. I just need time to figure out how." Neither of them realized the flight attendant was passing by, offering snacks. In that moment, a profound hush had fallen over the row. As the plane sailed through a patch of clouds, they continued to gaze at each other, bound by a secret that had just reshaped both their futures. Once the plane broke through the thin cloud layer and reached a smoother altitude, Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Outside, the setting sun painted the horizon in streaks of orange and purple, as if hinting at the extraordinary shift looming in his life. He could almost feel the climate-controlled cabin press closer, a reminder that here, in the sky, there was no escape. Next to him, Sophie gingerly folded up the ultrasound photos and tucked them back into their envelope. Her expression bore traces of relief, but also the same underlying anxiety that pinned Ethan to his seat. They had only just revealed a lifetime's worth of secrets. Neither had any clue what to do with them next. Moments after the flight attendants collected the empty glasses and trash from first class, Ethan leaned closer. His voice was subdued, carefully measured. "You said you emailed me. Tried calling the office. If I'd known—" He paused, the weight of his own words catching on his tongue. "I don't hold it against you," Sophie replied softly, her eyes flickering with vulnerability. "I didn't expect you to pick up the phone personally. I'm sure that's your staff's job to weed out, well, everything." She glanced at her belly, as if remembering exactly why she was there. "But it left me in a pretty desperate position, not being able to reach you." Ethan pressed a hand over his eyes, massaging the tension that coiled in his temples. "If I'd had the faintest idea—" His voice drifted away. He couldn't finish the sentence. How could he? If he had known, would he have forced a child into his schedule the way he did a business deal? That thought twisted uncomfortably in his chest. He risked a look at her pregnant stomach. Sophie's hand rested there protectively, as though she were silently communicating reassurance to the two tiny souls inside. He felt a fleeting pang of envy, While he had spent those 6 months rushing from boardroom to boardroom, signing contracts he barely had time to read, Sophie had been nurturing lives, his children. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words hushed. He wasn't sure if they were enough, or if they would ever be enough. Sophie managed a small nod, accepting the sentiment. "We can't rewrite what's happened. All we can do is figure out how to move forward." A crackle from the overhead speaker interrupted them. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot's voice resonated calmly, "we'll be turning off the seatbelt sign shortly. You're free to move about the cabin. We anticipate an on-time arrival." Ethan sighed, realizing that very soon they would land, and this fleeting realm of forced proximity would disappear, possibly the only chance he had to talk to her without distraction. His entire schedule, thick with corporate obligations, philanthropic appearances, and high-stakes negotiations, was about to collide with a personal crisis that would shift all his carefully plotted plans. "I'd like to help you," he said, his tone laced with resolve. "I just need to wrap my head around this." Sophie's gaze dropped to her hands. "I know. Honestly, I was afraid you'd tell me to leave you alone. Afraid you'd think I was someone looking for hush money or trying to trap you. That's why I got on this plane. I needed you to see me in person." She glanced up, meeting his eyes. The unspoken truth passed between them. Her presence wasn't about a payout. It was about rights, responsibilities, and decency. It was about giving their children something neither of them had yet, a future with both parents acknowledged, or at least the possibility of it. "I don't want to complicate your life," Sophie murmured, "but I also know these babies didn't ask for any of this. I just want them to know who their father is." Her quiet conviction flustered Ethan more than any corporate adversary he'd ever faced. "You're right," he managed, drawing in a steadying breath. "They deserve the truth, and I owe it to them." A pause. Sophie turned her head slightly, observing a couple in the row ahead. They were holding hands, exchanging affectionate smiles. "I'm not naive enough to think you'll drop everything you're doing and become a doting father overnight," she added. "But Something in Ethan stirred, a tightening in his chest that felt suspiciously like guilt. "I don't know what kind of father I can be," he admitted, voice low. "My world has always been schedules, growth forecasts, expansions into new markets. I never even let myself think about being a parent. This is brand new territory." Sophie exhaled softly, acknowledging the revelation. "I didn't plan this either, but life rarely cares about our plans. It just happens." They fell into a contemplative quiet. A flight attendant approached to offer hot towels, and both politely declined. When she left, Ethan's phone buzzed from the seatback pocket, likely a text from an associate. He hesitated, then pressed it to silent. For once, business could wait. He found himself studying Sophie, trying to piece together the details of her life that he'd overlooked after their single night in London. He remembered her telling him about a small company she was trying to start, something about holistic design or artisan crafts he couldn't fully recall. They'd been two strangers sharing confessions about their respective dreams, back when the city lights and an unplanned bottle of wine blurred caution into curiosity. A single night, ephemeral yet powerful enough to bring them here. "What about your family?" Ethan asked quietly. "Do you have anyone to help you?" She shrugged. "My mom passed away years ago. My dad's... well, let's just say we're not close. Friends have tried to be supportive, but they have their own lives. They're not the father of my children. They don't have the resources I need right now." Resources. That single word hammered at him. For some reason, it settled in Ethan's mind like a promise he wasn't sure he was ready to make. Yet if anything, he had resources in abundance. Money, property, influence. Would it be enough to fill the void he sensed in Sophie's gaze, or to nurture two babies who didn't choose to be part of this complicated scenario? A sudden ping of turbulence shook the cabin, making the overhead lights flicker. Sophie pressed a hand to her abdomen again. Ethan instinctively reached out, an instinct to safeguard, though from what, he wasn't sure. She caught his movement and sent him a fleeting, grateful smile. He forced himself to speak. "Once we land, let's find a moment to talk properly. I have a driver waiting. We can go somewhere. Neutral, maybe a lounge at the airport. We can plan the next steps." Sophie's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "I'll take whatever time you can give me." Their conversation hushed once the flight attendant returned, offering them dinner menus. Neither appeared very interested in the choices, but they accepted out of courtesy. As soon as the attendant stepped away, Ethan leaned in again, searching for the right words. "There's something else," Sophie said quietly, as if reading the anxiety in his posture. "I'm already under the care of a doctor, Dr. Davies. I'm not asking you to find me some fancy hospital wing. I'm comfortable where I am. But these are twins, and it's a high-risk pregnancy. I need to be certain I can handle everything that might come up. So far, it's been normal, but I've had some episodes of intense fatigue, my blood pressure, little things. The idea of going it alone? It's more daunting than I'd like to admit." Ethan studied the lines of worry etched in her features. She looked so composed, but behind that, he sensed her vulnerability. How many times had he given business partners second chances, or poured millions into bold ventures with no guarantee of profit? Yet here he was, hesitating about giving himself to something far more significant, far more lasting. "I can help," he said, voice steady. "Financially, medically, logistically. Whatever you need, I'll do my best. I need you to be patient with me. This is big." Sophie's shoulders relaxed visibly. "Thank you. And I'm sorry for springing this on you in such a dramatic fashion, on a flight of all places. But I didn't know any other way to make sure we had this moment." Ethan nodded, swirling through thoughts so numerous he couldn't pin them down. He glimpsed a future with legal advisors and scandal-hungry press, investors possibly nervous about the CEO's sudden paternal obligations. Or maybe it wouldn't go that way at all. Maybe it would be simpler than he imagined. The only sure thing was that 2 lives not yet born were about to reshape the trajectory of everything he thought he knew. Gently, Sophie placed the ultrasound envelope in Ethan's hands one more time. "Whenever you have doubts," she said softly, "they're right there, growing every day." Turbulence rattled the plane again, causing the lights to blink. Like an omen, Ethan thought wryly. His once stable path was on shaky ground. Yet beneath the fear, he felt a faint surge of protectiveness. He secured the envelope in the seat pocket, determined not to misplace it. "We'll handle this," he murmured. "Together, somehow." Sophie exhaled a breath that sounded like gratitude, and for the remainder of the flight they spoke in low tones. While Ethan's mind raced with implications, press releases, contingency plans, rethinking his non-stop traveling, he found himself focusing more and more on Sophie's quiet strength. She wasn't demanding the impossible from him. She was just offering him the opportunity to be the father his children deserved. At last, the captain announced their final descent. The day's last rays bathed the plane as it prepared to land, enveloping them in a soft glow. Neither Sophie nor Ethan said much during that time. Words seemed unnecessary, overshadowed by the magnitude of the revelation itself. Both stared out the window, each lost in a swirl of hopes, fears, and decisions yet to be made. When the wheels touched the runway, Ethan's heart lurched in his chest. The plane rolled toward the gate, and he pictured himself stepping off, phone ringing with messages from anxious associates. But this time, there would be something more urgent than the next deal. He glanced sideways at Sophie, whose fingers curled around the armrest. She caught his eye, and a gentle understanding passed between them. Yes, everything was different now. For better or for worse, his life had irrevocably changed. "Ethan," she said quietly, unbuckling her seatbelt as the seatbelt sign turned off. "Yes? Thank you for at least listening, for not shutting me out." He nodded once, still uncertain of the right words. "We'll talk as soon as we're out there," he promised, pointing to the aisle where passengers were already jockeying to remove their bags from overhead bins, and as the line inched forward and they prepared to exit the aircraft, Ethan Montgomery silently vowed he wouldn't let himself vanish behind a fortress of corporate tasks again. He would meet those twins, tiny strangers still growing in Sophie's womb, and learn what it meant to be a father, no matter how terrifying that prospect felt. Ethan stepped onto the jet bridge, the hush of first class giving way to the cacophony of the airport terminal. Fluorescent lights gleamed off polished floors, and the distant chatter of travelers filled the air. He felt as though he'd just jumped from one reality into another. Moments ago, he was seated next to Sophie, hearing the life-altering news of impending fatherhood. Now the world around him bustled on as if nothing had changed. Despite his outward composure, he was, after all, a seasoned businessman accustomed to concealing stress. An internal storm raged. His heart pounded with the realization that within the next few hours, he was expected at a high-profile business function, where investors would undoubtedly want his full attention. But how could he think of share prices or merger updates now, with Sophie's words reverberating in his mind? A tug on his arm made him pause. Sophie, slowed by her pregnant belly, was trying to keep pace. She looked pale, exhausted from the trip and the emotional toll of her confession. Ethan instinctively offered a steadying hand. Her lips curved in gratitude, though the lines of fatigue under her eyes spoke volumes. "Where's your luggage?" he asked gently. "I have one suitcase," Sophie replied. "I can manage. It's not too heavy." Ethan opened his mouth to protest. He was more than willing to carry it for her, but caught the flicker of resolve in her gaze. A part of her was determined not to appear helpless, so he merely nodded and gestured for her to walk alongside him. He had no illusions that letting her lug around her own suitcase would solve the deeper vulnerability she'd just shared with him, but for the moment, it seemed like the right gesture of respect. The crowd from their flight merged into the main corridor, funneling past blinking digital screens of arrivals and departures. Ethan resisted the temptation to pull out his phone. He knew it would be teeming with messages from his associates, but he wanted to focus on Sophie, on figuring out what to say, how to plan these next steps. She deserved that much. As they approached the baggage claim, Ethan caught sight of his driver, Russell, standing among a line of suited chauffeurs. Russell's face lit up briefly with recognition as he spotted Ethan, though he looked a bit surprised to see a second person at his side. Ethan offered him a quick, discreet nod, signaling that he'd be there in a moment. They found Sophie's suitcase without trouble, a modest piece of luggage that had seen better days. She placed a hand on it, squaring her shoulders, then glanced at Ethan. "I don't want to inconvenience you or anything," she said, voice subdued in the background noise of the airport. "But if you do have a bit of time to talk—" "I do," he said, cutting her off gently. "I mean, I have other obligations, but this is more important." Her shoulders dropped slightly in relief. It struck him how alone she must have felt these past months, with no clear path to reach him. If not for the wild chance of catching him on a flight, how long might it have taken before he realized he was about to become a father? He led Sophie toward Russell. The driver greeted Ethan with a courteous half-bow, then nodded politely to Sophie. "Shall I take the luggage?" Russell asked, eyeing the suitcase. "Yes, please," Ethan replied, turning to Sophie. "Russell will put that in the car." Sophie relinquished the handle. As the driver escorted the bag away, Ethan gestured in the direction of the private car pickup. "I was thinking we could talk at the airport lounge, but if you prefer privacy, I can have Russell drive us somewhere quieter." She pressed her lips together thoughtfully. "Maybe somewhere less busy. I don't want to be overheard by strangers." He nodded, guiding her through the corridors that opened into a large glass doorway leading outside. The last remnants of daylight kissed the city skyline, and the mild evening breeze felt like a soft caress against the tension building in his skin. Russell had the car, a sleek black town car, waiting. He held the door open for both Sophie and Ethan. Once inside, Ethan settled into the leather seat, while Sophie eased down carefully. Russell tapped the wheel. "Destination, sir?" Ethan paused, mind racing. Hotels near the airport were likely crowded with travelers. His usual choices, a private members club or an upscale restaurant, felt wholly inappropriate for a conversation about fatherhood and unborn twins. A sudden memory surfaced, a quiet park about 15 minutes from the airport, one of the few places he used to visit when he needed to think. It had a secluded pavilion with benches beneath towering oaks. "Take us to Glasswood Park," he said at last. Russell raised an eyebrow in curiosity, but didn't question the request. He simply merged into traffic with practiced ease. For a while, the car glided through the city's outskirts in silence. Sophie gazed out the window, her reflection betraying her internal worries. Ethan studied her in intermittent glances, noticing the slight curve of her belly pressed against her dress. So many questions clamored in his mind. He wanted to ask about her health in more detail, about finances, about whether she'd considered living arrangements. But each question felt too large, too loaded. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "Sophie, can you tell me more about the pregnancy? How have you been feeling? Are there complications?" Her eyes flicked over to him, and the corner of her mouth twitched in a sad smile. "I won't lie. It's been draining. Twin pregnancies are often higher risk. I've had bouts of dizziness. My doctor is keeping a close watch on my blood pressure. Right now I'm stable, but I have to be careful." Ethan frowned. "When's your next appointment?" "In a week. I have scans every couple of weeks now." He nodded, pressing his palms together. "I'd like to be there, if that's not too much of an intrusion, to see them." The words felt foreign on his tongue, them, referencing two little humans he had yet to meet. Yet the more he said it, the more real it became. "I'd like that," Sophie replied, her eyes softening. "It would help me feel less alone in all this." The car drifted off the main road toward the quieter district, and soon they arrived at Glasswood Park. Dimly lit lamps dotted a winding path through tall trees. Russell pulled the car alongside the curb. "Shall I wait here, Mr. Montgomery?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. "We won't be too long." He stepped out first, offering Sophie a hand to steady herself. For a moment they stood on the sidewalk, the hush of the park enveloping them. Only the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant chirping of crickets broke the stillness. It felt like a bubble of calm miles away from the incessant hum of city life. "Over there," Ethan said, pointing to a small pavilion perched near a cluster of oaks. A single lamppost illuminated a path leading to it, giving just enough light to see where they were going. Sophie walked beside him, her breathing slightly labored, though she tried to hide it. He noticed and slowed his pace, letting her set the rhythm. Soon they reached the pavilion. Beneath its wooden beams stood a simple bench. The overhead bulb cast a warm glow onto chipped cement floors. Despite the ordinary surroundings, Ethan felt a sense of reverence, as if they'd stepped into a quiet sanctuary. Sophie settled onto the bench, exhaling as she pressed a hand against her belly. Ethan took a seat beside her, leaving a respectful bit of space between them. Still, he couldn't help noticing the faint quiver of her shoulders. "Tell me about your life," he said quietly. "Since that night. I mean, everything. How you've been coping." She hesitated, arms folded protectively over her stomach. "After we parted ways in London, I went back to my place. I was in a kind of daze. It felt like a whirlwind romance that was never meant to last. We never exchanged phone numbers. It all happened so fast." She paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Then I found out I was pregnant. Everything changed. I had to slow down. My small design business is on hold because I don't have the energy. Money got tight quickly. I had some savings, but not enough for everything that comes with a high-risk pregnancy. Ethan felt an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. He'd spent millions, on acquisitions and expansions in the last 6 months, all while Sophie struggled with something so profoundly life-altering: alone. He ran a hand over his jaw. "I'm sorry," he repeated, though he knew the words sounded insufficient. "That's why I tried so hard to reach you," she continued. "Not to demand anything. I mean, yes, I need help, but I also believed you had a right to know. That night in London, it was real. It mattered. It wasn't just a fling for me." A flicker of memory shot through Ethan. The gentle murmur of her voice by the edge of the Thames, the moment they'd let themselves be vulnerable, sharing regrets and small confessions. He had felt oddly at peace with her, free from the usual corporate masks he wore. "I didn't see it as just a fling," he said softly. "I guess I tried to block it out because it felt too personal. Too different from the life I've lived so far." She met his gaze. "I understand, but it brought us here." He let out a slow breath. A slight breeze swept leaves across the pavilion floor. "Yes, and now that we're here, I want to do what's right. Not just writing a check, but actually being there." Sophie's lower lip trembled in a tiny flicker of relief or anxiety. He wasn't sure. "I appreciate that more than you know. I'm afraid, Ethan. Doing this by myself. I have no safety net, no huge savings. My father isn't in the picture. My mom is gone. Every night I wonder if I'll be strong enough to bring these two into the world properly." Ethan reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. The night air felt cooler now, and the warmth of their joined hands seemed to radiate with an unspoken vow. "You're not alone anymore. I promise." They sat there, absorbing the enormity of it all. The fragile peace of the park pressed against Ethan's pulse. He thought about the hush of the forest, how it contrasted with his usual environment of boardrooms and stock tickers. Perhaps it was appropriate that they confronted something so deeply human in a place removed from the frantic pulse of city life. "I do have to figure out the logistics," he said carefully. "I travel a lot. My company is on the verge of a major international deal. The press is always swirling around me if they catch a whiff of anything out of place. But that doesn't mean I can't be present. We'll work it out, step by step." Sophie nodded, eyes moist. "I was so scared you'd just reject this outright. I can handle being a single mom if necessary. But I didn't want them to grow up not knowing their father." He squeezed her hand gently. "They won't. But there are going to be details we need to iron out. I can get you better medical care. Make sure you have what you need: nutrition, a safe place to stay, a steady income to hold you over while you focus on the pregnancy." She blinked in surprise. "That's generous. It's the least I can do." Sophie studied his face as if searching for a catch. Finding none, she released a soft, shaky exhale. "I do have to be cautious, though. This is your first reaction, and it's been surprisingly supportive. I just need to know you won't vanish if the business world calls you away. I can't chase you across continents, Ethan." He swallowed. At that moment, his phone vibrated in his pocket, likely a message from his board members or a personal assistant frantic about his next appointment. But he ignored it. "I'll prove it through actions," he said. "This is as real as it gets for me, too. I can't let my children, our children, grow up as an afterthought. That goes against everything I believe in, even if I've never actually put it to the test until now." Sophie's eyes welled with tears, though a small smile curved her lips. A tear escaped, and she brushed it away quickly. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll figure it out, step by step." They sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet park acting as a neutral witness to their unspoken understanding. In the distance, the glow of the city pulsed, hinting at the life Ethan was set to return to, one consumed by deals, deadlines, and the relentless pace of corporate ambition. Yet, right here, he had discovered something that made him reevaluate everything: the promise of fatherhood and an entirely different definition of success. He heard a rustling of leaves. He caught a glimpse of Russell nearby, hovering at a discreet distance, likely checking to ensure they were safe. The shape of the driver's silhouette reminded Ethan that time was slipping by. The meeting he was supposed to attend would start soon. The investors would wonder why he was late. But for once, it didn't feel urgent. This conversation had to happen, uninterrupted. "I have a place in the city," Ethan said suddenly, glancing at Sophie. "It's not my main residence. I keep it for out-of-town guests or visiting partners. It's comfortable, fully furnished. If you need somewhere to stay during the pregnancy, somewhere stable with no paparazzi lurking—" Sophie's eyebrows arched in surprise. "You'd let me stay there?" "I want to provide security for you and the twins," he said softly, trying to gauge her reaction. "If that's too much, I understand. We can think of an alternative. But I'm offering it as an option." She turned the idea over in her mind. Her shoulders trembled with relief, though she tried to keep her composure. "It might be exactly what I need," she admitted. "My current place it's basically a studio. No elevator, and it's not the safest neighborhood. Carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs is already a challenge, and it'll only get harder." "Then let's arrange it. We can finalize the details as soon as you're comfortable." He paused, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. "I can also bring in an accountant or financial planner to help you map out any expenses, set up a fund for medical bills, or for when the babies are born." She placed a trembling hand over her heart, then smiled through tears that threatened to spill again. "Thank you, Ethan. This means more than you know. You're saving me and them a lot of stress." He brushed a soft fingertip near her cheek, wiping away a stray tear that had rolled down. It was perhaps the most intimate moment they'd shared since that night in London. No wine, no city lights, no fancy after-party. Just 2 people confronting the fragile, beautiful truth of their connection. "I need to meet Dr. Davies," he said finally. "I'd like him to know I'm also involved, that you can have whatever care you need." Sophie sniffled, nodding. "I'll give you his contact. My next appointment is soon, so if you want to come—" "I do," he said firmly, as if stamping an official seal on his words. She took a moment to gather herself, then inhaled the cool night air. "We should get back. You probably have a million things." "Doesn't matter," Ethan said, voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Tonight, this conversation was the most important thing on my schedule." Sophie held his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, neither said a word. Then the hum of a distant siren and the flicker of a street lamp reminded them life was still moving. Carefully, Ethan stood, offering her his arm. She accepted, easing herself to her feet. Together, they strolled back toward the waiting car, step by measured step. A swirl of new emotions coursed through him: worry, protectiveness, a sense of impending fatherhood. Was he up to the task? His entire life had been about business. Yet something else blossomed in him, a determination to show Sophie she'd done the right thing by trusting him, and a quiet, cautious hope that perhaps fatherhood would open a new dimension he never knew he needed. Russell, upon seeing them approach, opened the rear door. Sophie slid in first, and Ethan followed, shutting out the night air. In the relative hush of the car, he glanced once more at Sophie's belly, an unspoken vow forming in his mind. He would not fail them. "Russell," he said, leaning forward to speak to the driver, "take Sophie wherever she needs to go, then I'll head to my appointment. I need to make sure she's settled." "Of course, sir," Russell answered, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. As the engine purred and the car pulled away from the curb, Sophie turned to Ethan. "You don't have to—" He placed a hand over hers. "I want to," he stated simply, their gazes locked in mutual understanding. Yes, they still had a maze of logistics to navigate and more revelations to share. But for the first time, it felt like they were walking this path together, rather than stumbling alone in the dark. They drove on, passing neon signs and quiet storefronts, each lost in thoughts of a future about to be shaped by two tiny heartbeats they could not yet see. Outside, the city's bustle took on an oddly peaceful glow. And within that hush, Ethan Montgomery, CEO of a business empire, learned the first lesson of fatherhood: to be present, truly and fully, even when the rest of the world demanded otherwise. The ride through the city was quiet, punctuated only by the low hum of the car's engine and the faint rush of other vehicles passing in the opposite lane. Sophie leaned back against the leather seat, her gaze drifting from Ethan to the subdued glow of streetlights outside. Even though they'd agreed to move forward step by step, neither of them could escape the magnitude of what lay ahead. Ethan kept one hand clasped over Sophie's, a silent reassurance that he was there. Meanwhile, his phone buzzed on the seat next to him, a meeting reminder, no doubt. He let it vibrate a few extra seconds before finally flipping it over to glance at the screen. Indeed, a polite message from his personal assistant. "Investors have arrived. They're asking if you're running late." He felt the pull of his responsibilities. He had built his entire life around his company, forging it into one of the most influential conglomerates in the region. Yet now, for the first time in recent memory, he realized there were matters that needed him more than share prices or profit margins. "You can drop me at my place," Sophie offered, noticing the text's effect on him. "I don't want to keep you from your obligations. I can manage." But Ethan's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I'd rather see you safely settled," he replied. "I have a property not too far from here if you're okay moving in tonight. It might be sudden, but at least you won't have to climb those stairs at your old place. And tomorrow we can arrange for your belongings to be moved." Her eyes widened. "Tonight? Are you sure? I mean, the place must be empty, right?" He nodded. "It's always kept stocked for visiting partners. Groceries, linens. My household staff refreshes it every couple of weeks to ensure it's ready. I'd only need to make a quick call to let them know the occupant is, well, you." Sophie folded her arms over her belly, thinking, "I don't want you to drop everything and scramble. Still, it would be a relief." Ethan glanced at his phone again, mind set on a choice. "Russell, head downtown, please. We'll go to the Parkview apartment building." "Yes, Mr. Montgomery," came Russell's calm reply from the driver's seat. Sophie hesitated, then ventured quietly, "What about your meeting?" Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'll be late, or possibly miss it. I'll handle any fallout, don't worry about it." She blinked, noticing how resolute he sounded. In her mind, she pictured the Ethan she'd heard about in business magazines, decisive, relentless, someone who never let anything derail a critical deal. Yet here he was, skipping an appointment with high-profile investors to take care of her. The thought both warmed her heart and left her uneasy, but she realized she was in no condition to argue. Her fatigue was mounting, and the idea of a safe, comfortable space to rest was too tempting to turn down out of guilt. They spent the next few minutes in companionable silence until the car slowed before a modern high-rise in a more secluded part of downtown. The building stood taller than most of its neighbors, its steel and glass facade catching the glow of surrounding lights. Russell eased into a private underground parking entrance, nodding at a security guard who recognized Ethan immediately. Once parked, Ethan stepped out first and offered Sophie his hand. She accepted, carefully maneuvering out of the car with a soft sigh. Russell unloaded her suitcase and gestured toward an elevator tucked away at the back of the garage. Everything about the place felt discreet, sheltered from the prying eyes of paparazzi or business reporters. Ethan swiped a key card at the elevator's control panel, then pressed the button for the 22nd floor. "This is a corporate apartment, but it's under a different subsidiary name," he explained, noticing Sophie's curious look. It's less tied to my public profile in case the media ever starts poking around." "I appreciate that," she murmured, trying to calm the flutter of nerves in her stomach. She knew the last thing Ethan needed was a tabloid scandal proclaiming him the surprise father of twins. She'd already braced herself for the possibility that eventually their situation might leak. But for tonight at least, they seemed to have found a pocket of privacy. The elevator opened directly into a private foyer, softly lit by recessed fixtures. As they stepped forward, glass doors slid open, revealing a sleek, open-concept living space. Modern furniture contrasted with warm wooden floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Though it was minimalist in style, it exuded an understated luxury: plush rugs, tasteful artwork, and just enough personal touches to avoid feeling sterile. Sophie paused in the doorway, letting her eyes roam over the space. I don't even know what to say," she admitted, voice trembling with equal parts gratitude and overwhelm. "It's beautiful. More than I could have hoped for." Ethan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Make yourself at home. Seriously, I'd feel better knowing you're here instead of that walk-up apartment." He turned to Russell, who had brought the suitcase up in a second elevator. "You can leave the bag by the hall closet, Russell. Thanks. That'll be all for tonight." The driver nodded and, after a respectful bow, stepped back into the elevator, leaving them alone. Sophie took another step into the living room, eyes drawn to the view. Lights glittered across the city, threading between towering buildings and winding streets. She'd spent months in a cramped, single-room studio, counting every penny. The contrast was almost surreal. Ethan guided her toward a plush armchair. "Sit. Let me get you some water." She sank into the seat, letting out a soft breath she hadn't realized she was holding. In the quiet hush of the apartment, she could finally feel the day's fatigue crashing over her. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, trying to steady the swirl of emotions, relief, apprehension, gratitude, and a persistent kernel of anxiety about what all this meant. Within moments, Ethan returned with a cold glass of water. He seemed more thoughtful than ever, brows knit in contemplation. "Here," he murmured, handing it to her. "Drink." She accepted, taking a slow sip that soothed her parched throat. With the water came a slight tremor in her hands. Perhaps everything was catching up to her. The flight, the tension of revealing her secret, the weight of uncertainty for her children's future. So many nights she'd braced herself for rejection. Yet here he was, reorganizing his life to help her. She wasn't sure how to handle the intensity of her relief. "Let's get you settled into a proper bed," Ethan suggested gently. "You look exhausted. There's a guest suite down the hallway." He pointed to a corridor on the apartment's eastern side. "Has its own bathroom, closet, all that." Sophie opened her mouth to protest. She didn't want to keep him from whatever commitments he had left, but the sincerity in his gaze dissolved her objections. "All right," she conceded softly. He retrieved her suitcase and led her through a minimalist hallway adorned with a few black-and-white photographs of cityscapes. The guest suite was anything but small. A queen-sized bed with crisp linens, a reading chair near a window, and a door leading to a private bathroom. Polished surfaces and carefully placed decorative touches made it feel welcoming. "This is for me?" she asked, voice faint with incredulity. "It's like a hotel suite." Ethan set her suitcase at the foot of the bed, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, it's yours for as long as you need it." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I'll make arrangements tomorrow to stock your fridge. Maybe hire a cook or a home aide if you think that would help. I don't want you to stress about day-to-day tasks." She blinked, struck speechless for a moment. "Ethan, I don't know if I can accept all of this. You've done so much already." His brows furrowed. "It's not charity, Sophie, it's responsibility. I'm the father, and you're carrying twins. The least I can do is ensure you have a safe, comfortable place." Then, seeing her troubled expression, he softened. But if it's overwhelming, tell me. We'll find a balance. I don't want to bulldoze you with my resources." A tremulous smile touched her lips. "You're not bulldozing. I'm just not used to having this kind of help. Thank you." Ethan nodded, seemingly relieved. He guided her to sit on the bed's edge and paused there, uncertain. The intimacy of the moment reminded him that they didn't really know each other's everyday mannerisms or routines. Their connection was built on a single night, and now a shared future that neither had expected. Yet the gentle warmth in Sophie's eyes hinted that, awkward or not, they were in it together. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, voice subdued. "Painkillers? More water? Anything?" She shook her head. "I have what I need. Just rest, I think." A yawn escaped her, underscoring the statement. "You should go to your meeting. I feel guilty you've missed so much tonight." He glanced at the clock on the nightstand, which read a little past 9. "It's all right. They'll reschedule, or I'll manage it in the morning. My top priority is making sure you're all right." A trace of color rose in her cheeks. She thought of telling him how that single statement felt like balm to her raw nerves, that the father of her children was someone who could pivot from corporate warrior to caretaker in a single heartbeat. But she held back. Emotions loomed large, and she worried she'd break down if she spoke too freely. Instead, she settled for a quiet, "Thank you again. For everything." Ethan nodded, then seemed to muster some courage of his own. He stepped closer, gently placing a hand against her shoulder. "Rest," he repeated. "Tomorrow. Let's figure out the next steps. Doctor's appointments, moving your things, everything else." She glanced down at the floor, then back up into his eyes. "Tomorrow," she agreed, voice tender. For a moment, they lingered in silence, the gravity of their new reality drawing them together and holding them in a tentative bubble of understanding. Then, with a faintly awkward pat of her arm, far different from the confident composure he typically radiated, Ethan stepped back. "I'll let you get some sleep," he said. "I'll be just down the hall if you need anything." Another pause. "I'm not going anywhere." Those last words hung in the air even after he quietly shut the door behind him. Sophie exhaled, her body sagging with relief as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. If anyone had told her a few weeks ago that Ethan Montgomery would be tucking her into a luxurious apartment and promising to stand by her, she would have scoffed. Yet here they were. Standing in the guest suite, she took in the neutral tones, the city lights glimmering through the window, and the unfamiliar softness beneath her feet. She rested a hand on her belly, imagining the little lives growing inside. "We're safe," she whispered, as though speaking to them. "It'll be all right." A gentle pressure responded from within, perhaps one of the twins shifting. A small, hopeful laugh escaped her lips, and she made her way to the bed, sinking onto the cool, crisp sheets. Meanwhile, Ethan lingered in the hallway, debating if he should stay overnight or return to his main penthouse across town. He was itching to check his missed calls and respond to important emails. But part of him wanted to remain close in case Sophie woke from a nightmare or needed something in the night. In the end, he chose to remain, settling on the sofa in the living room after making a short round of calls to appease anxious board members. While he typed out measured responses about a delayed meeting and assurances of his unwavering leadership, a quiet, unfamiliar sense of responsibility weighed on him. Something more vital than business was taking root in his mind. He was soon to be a father, and that knowledge, oddly enough, felt like the greatest merger he'd ever set in motion, one he had no intention of letting fail. He put his phone aside at last and stared out the window, the city aglow beneath the moonlight. His life had once been about forging alliances and conquering markets. Now, it was about forging trust with a woman he barely knew and conquering fears he'd never dared confront. Slowly, his shoulders relaxed. The hush of the apartment cradled him, and despite the swirl of uncertainties, he let himself believe that perhaps he was on the threshold of something that transcended wealth and renown, something deeply human, terrifying, and beautiful. A pale sliver of morning light seeped through the large windows, throwing soft, slanted shadows on the apartment's sleek floor. For a moment, Ethan blinked in disorientation, trying to remember where he was. He'd fallen asleep on the sofa, tie still half-knotted, dress shirt rumpled, and phone buzzing intermittently on the coffee table. Outside, the city had started to stir. Honking cabs and distant construction noise filtered through the glass. A faint sound down the hall caught his attention. He rubbed his eyes and rose, running a hand over his slightly stiff neck. But before he could move toward the guest suite, Sophie appeared, dressed in a simple t-shirt and loose pajama pants she'd presumably found in her suitcase. Her hair was up in a messy bun, and faint circles marred the delicate skin beneath her eyes. Despite the obvious fatigue, she still managed a small smile. "Good morning," she greeted softly, one hand resting on her belly as if out of habit. He forced a grin, trying to brush away the haze of sleep. "Morning. Did you rest well?" She shrugged, gaze dropping for a moment. "I woke up a few times. Twins didn't exactly let me sleep in, but the bed was very comfortable. Thank you." Ethan noted her reserved stance. He sensed her uncertainty about what was expected of her in his world. After all, she'd never lived in the orbit of his luxury surroundings. The fact that she'd summoned the courage to leave her own place and sleep in a near stranger's apartment spoke volumes about her situation. Inwardly, he recalled the final texts he'd seen late last night, glancing at them by the glow of the city lights. His associates were anxious. His board wanted answers about why he'd missed that crucial investor meeting. But for once, the mild pressure in his chest wasn't from a business angle. It was from something far more personal, and oddly, it felt more important than any deal ever had. "Have you eaten?" Ethan asked, voice still slightly rough with morning gruffness. Sophie gave a slight shake of her head. "I was just going to see if there's anything in the fridge, but I don't want to mess up your kitchen." He almost laughed, a quiet, gentle laugh because the kitchen was the least of his concerns. "I'll show you," he said, leading her across the open living area and into a sleek modern kitchen with quartz countertops and high-end stainless steel appliances. A large window overlooked the skyline, the sun's rays catching on steel and glass as the metropolis rumbled awake. Sophie trailed behind him, taking in the space. He opened the fridge to reveal fresh fruit, various kinds of juice, eggs, and a range of basics. It wasn't an enormous stock, no produce overflowing from the shelves, but it was enough for a light breakfast. The cleaning service must have restocked recently, he noted. "I can whip up something," he offered. "Maybe scrambled eggs, toast, if that works for you." Her lips curved, ever so slightly. "You cook?" He gave a casual shrug. "It's been a while, but I'm not hopeless in the kitchen. I'm used to personal chefs, but I can manage the basics. Or we can order in if you'd rather." "No, eggs are fine," she said, sounding relieved. "I'd like something simple." He nodded, rummaging through drawers until he found a pan and utensils. Sophie hovered at the edge of the kitchen island, a little unsure of where to situate herself. Eventually, she moved closer to the window, leaning one hip against the counter for support. He noticed she occasionally winced, a slight shift suggesting discomfort from carrying twins. Without a word, Ethan grabbed a dining chair from the adjacent nook and gently nudged it toward her. "Sit," he murmured. "Cooking breakfast is the least I can do." She sat, exhaling. For a minute, they were enveloped in the quiet hum of the apartment's ventilation and the soft clatter of Ethan cracking eggs into a bowl. The stillness felt almost domestic. An unspoken question hovered in the air. Could they find some normalcy amidst this whirlwind? When he slid the scrambled eggs onto 2 plates and popped a few slices of bread into the toaster, Sophie bit her lip. "If you hadn't become a CEO, what would you have done?" Kershey asked suddenly, as if searching for a glimpse beyond the formidable businessman she'd heard about. He paused, spatula poised, reflecting. "I never really considered not being in business. Growing up, I was always around my grandfather's import and export company. I guess I just followed the path laid out before me. But maybe I'd have studied architecture or design. I've always admired beautiful structures. There's something about building something from the ground up. She smiled, intrigued. Huh, I wouldn't have guessed that. He dished out the eggs, then reached for the toast as it popped up. The smell of butter and breakfast wafted pleasantly in the air, mixing with the morning light. "Your turn," he said. "What would you be doing if you weren't running your own small design business?" A gentle laugh escaped her, though it carried a hint of wistfulness. "I wanted to be an art teacher once. I loved the idea of guiding kids to express themselves. Showing them color and shape could be a way to tell stories. Life kind of pulled me in a different direction, though." He placed the plates on the marble countertop, nodding to her to begin. Sophie picked up a fork, eyes flickering with gratitude. The first bite seemed to calm the subtle tension in her face. He realized how hungry she must have been. Anxiety over the past few days probably hadn't helped her appetite. After a few bites, she spoke again, softer this time. "I appreciate all of this. It's more than I expected, but I still feel like we're dancing around the giant elephant in the room. How exactly we're going to handle everything when the twins arrive?" Ethan swallowed, feeling a surge of both worry and resolve. "I know we need a plan, but maybe we can break it down into stages so it doesn't crush us at once." She nodded, relieved he wasn't glossing over it. "That's a good approach. Stage 1. Medical stuff. My next ultrasound. Then meeting Dr. Davies, making sure I have the proper support. Maybe a few things about where I'll live, or if I'll stay here temporarily." He chased a piece of egg with his toast, thinking, "Yes, exactly. I can speak with Dr. Davies about any special care, or if we need to involve specialists. I can cover any additional tests. I want to make sure you're both, well, all three of you, are safe." Her cheeks flushed a little at his earnestness, but she carried on. "Then stage 2. Figuring out what happens after the birth. I mean, I'll need to sort out my design business eventually, see if I can get it running again. But I'll have 2 newborns. I'll need to figure out childcare, finances, whether I can handle it alone. Or if you want to be involved in day-to-day things." She cast him a hopeful look and he exhaled. "I do, Sophie, I really do. But my schedule—" He sighed, setting his fork down. "My schedule is insane, especially with a merger in progress. It won't be simple, but that doesn't mean I won't find a way. If that involves hiring a nanny or moving you closer to my main residence so I can see the babies often, I'll do it." She processed his words, nibbling on toast. "That sounds good," she ventured, smile uncertain but appreciative. "I don't want you to break your entire life. I just want our children to know their father in a real way. If that means juggling logistics, that's okay." "I understand," he said, leaning on the counter. Outside, the sun rose further, illuminating the city's skyscrapers. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it for the moment, focusing on Sophie. "I never thought I'd have kids, at least not in the foreseeable future. Now I can't imagine walking away." She felt tears threaten to surface, so she busied herself with another bite of breakfast to hide it. Meanwhile, Ethan's phone buzzed again, more insistent. This time he glanced at it, brow furrowing as he read a text. "It's my assistant," he murmured apologetically. "They're in a panic about the investors. We lost some of them last night when I didn't show." Sophie shifted. "Go handle it. I'm fine, really. There's a ton on your plate." He lifted his gaze from the screen, expression torn. "I don't want to leave you here alone with everything still so new." She forced a smile, attempting to reassure him. "I'll be all right, I promise. Maybe I can rest or explore the apartment a bit. You said you'd meet Dr. Davies, right? He's free around late afternoon, I believe. We can go together." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, conflicted. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, if you're sure. I'll schedule a driver to pick you up, or I can come back and pick you up myself, whatever you prefer. Let's just see how your day goes, she said. I don't want you driving all over the city if it's out of your way. I can meet you at Dr. Davies's office if you just send me the address. But either way, let's plan to meet there at 4. A faint line of stress eased in his brow. All right. 4 p.m. with the doctor. He paused. I'll call ahead and let him know. I want him to share everything. No keeping me in the dark. She nodded, finishing her eggs. The flavor was surprisingly comforting. Simple, warm, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures matter. He finished his toast and hopped off the stool, crossing to fetch his suit jacket from where it lay over the couch. In those moments, Sophie watched him. Tall, poised, quietly commanding, even when he was clearly juggling tensions from every side. She remembered how they'd met by chance, yet here he stood, making her breakfast and adjusting his entire schedule for her and the twins. The contrast between that night in London, so spontaneous, fueled by wine and whispered confessions, and this morning in a modern kitchen, planning a future for children neither had expected, was surreal. With his jacket in hand, he turned back to her. I'll program your phone with my direct line. Text or call if you need anything. She rose from the chair, pressing a hand gently to her stomach. Thank you for breakfast, she said, soft and genuine. He hesitated, then bridged the small distance to place a light hand on her arm. I'll be back in plenty of time so we can make that appointment together. His gaze flicked to her belly. Take it easy today, please. She nodded, throat tight, a blend of gratitude and emotion threatening to spill. I will. A subtle, fleeting impulse urged him to press a comforting kiss against her temple, but he held himself back, unsure if that crossed a boundary at this fragile stage. Instead, he offered a small smile and let his hand slide away. Then, with the sense of gravity that signaled his shift back into CEO mode, Ethan left. The apartment door clicked shut behind him, and Sophie sank into the sofa, exhaling a deep breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The silence enveloped her. She rubbed her belly, murmuring softly to the twins, as if reassuring them and herself that they weren't alone. Her phone chimed on the table. It was Ethan sending her his direct number, along with a quick message. Call if you need anything. We'll see you at 4. We've got this. She smiled down at the screen. We do, she whispered. Then, feeling exhaustion wash over her, she decided to rest before preparing for the afternoon's doctor's visit. She had no idea how the day, or the coming months, would unfold, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, Ethan strode into the elevator, already dialing his assistant. The moment the doors closed, his professional veneer solidified. He spoke in sharp, concise phrases, instructing them on damage control and new investor meetings. Yet, under that cool surface, his mind kept drifting back to a woman with eyes full of both worry and resolve, and 2 unborn children he'd vowed not to let down. He was stepping into his office realm once more, but with a different perspective guiding him, and somehow that dual reality, the meeting-laden CEO and the soon-to-be father, felt like the first real challenge worth fighting for, in a way he'd never experienced. Sophie wandered through the apartment after Ethan left, still adjusting to the lofty ceilings and broad windows that spilled sunlight across polished floors. She felt a tad like an intruder in some high-end showroom, each piece of furniture both inviting and somewhat intimidating. But she had to remind herself, Ethan had insisted. This was her space now, hers and the twins, for as long as she needed it. She ended up in the living room where the muted hum of the city seeped through the glass. A soft couch faced a large TV mounted on a minimalist wall. The coffee table held only a trio of art magazines and a small dish for keys. It looked more like a carefully curated photo from a design blog than a lived-in space. Her gaze drifted toward the windows, taking in the mid-morning hustle as cars snaked through the streets below. She wondered how Ethan was managing. Would his associates chew him out for missing that investor meeting? Would he regret sacrificing precious business time for her? The question prickled uncomfortably at her mind, an echo of the self-doubt she'd harbored since discovering her pregnancy. She knew her babies deserved support, yet the weight of that support from a man whose every minute cost money made her feel guilty. With a sigh, she glanced at the clock on her phone. She still had a few hours before the doctor's appointment at 4. It was tempting to curl up and try to nap, but her mind churned too much with a restless energy. Perhaps, she thought, a quiet walk around the building's corridors would help her get comfortable. Or maybe she could tidy up a bit, though the place barely had a speck of dust. Before she could decide, her phone rang softly, displaying a familiar name, Ava, her closest friend. Sophie smiled, relieved to hear a friendly voice. "Ava," she greeted, stepping onto the rug by the sofa for a cozier feel under her bare feet. "Hi." "Soph, how are you?" Ava asked, her tone bright but laced with concern. "I tried calling last night, but it went straight to voicemail." Sophie took a breath. She needed to tell Ava, but how to compress so many life changes into a quick update? "A lot's happened," she admitted, letting the words hang for a moment. "I, found him. The father." Ava's intake of breath crackled through the line. "Oh my God, you're serious?" "Yes, and it's complicated," Sophie said, her free hand drifting to rest over her belly. "He's actually been really kind. He's letting me stay in an apartment of his, so I'm not stuck in that old studio." She paused, scanning the crisp lines of the living room. "You wouldn't believe this place, Ava. It's like something out of a lifestyle magazine." "Wow," Ava breathed. "That's good, right? He's stepping up?" "He is," Sophie confirmed. "He even made me breakfast this morning, scrambled eggs. He wants to meet my doctor today, help pay for any extra care I might need. It's a whirlwind. I keep expecting to wake up and realize it's all some bizarre dream." Ava's tone softened. "Sophie, that's wonderful, but how do you feel about it? I know how worried you were that he might dismiss you." Sophie closed her eyes, recalling how Ethan had crouched at her side that morning, expression open and concerned. "It's not the scenario I pictured for becoming a mom," she confessed, "but I'm grateful. He seems genuinely determined to be involved." "And you like him," Ava teased gently. "Don't deny it. You've been holding on to that memory of your London night for months." Heat crept into Sophie's cheeks. "It's not about that," she fibbed half-heartedly. "I barely know him, remember? But yes, he's thoughtful. Better than I dared hope. But it's so new. I'm trying to be realistic. We have a lot of decisions ahead." Ava's voice brightened. "All the same, I'm so relieved for you, Soph. Honestly, you deserve the support, and I love that the twins' dad cares. Let yourself be happy about it." Sophie rubbed her forehead, 1,000 thoughts swirling. "I'll try," she said. "We're seeing Dr. Davies at 4. I'm nervous, Ava. What if something's wrong?" "You've been doing your checkups, right?" "Yes, but twins can be tricky. And now that Ethan's coming along, I feel pressured for everything to be perfect." Sophie sighed. "I should be happy he wants to be there. But a part of me wonders if it'll scare him off if the doctor says I need more bed rest or pricey procedures or—" "Sophie," Ava interjected gently, "don't overthink it. If he's genuine, he'll handle the news. And if he isn't, well, you'll know, right?" Sophie nodded, though Ava couldn't see. "Yeah, you're right. Listen, I'll keep you updated, okay? Thanks for checking in." "Always," Ava assured. "Take care of yourself, and let me know how the appointment goes." Sophie ended the call feeling a bit steadier. Sometimes a conversation with a good friend was enough to bolster her courage. She eyed the clock. Still hours to kill. Maybe a shower, then some quiet time reading. She rubbed her growing belly, feeling a swirl of activity inside. The twins seemed restless, too. "All right, little ones," she said softly, heading toward the guest room. "Let's try to relax until your dad comes back." Meanwhile, across town, Ethan paced behind his large mahogany desk, phone wedged between his shoulder and ear. The office boasted floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, a testament to his success. Yet it felt unusually claustrophobic today. He found himself checking the time every few minutes, anxious about leaving early enough to meet Sophie at the doctor's office. "Yes, I understand," Ethan said into the phone, forcing calm into his voice. On the other end was an investor whose multi-million-dollar commitment had wavered when Ethan abruptly canceled last night's meeting. "I appreciate your patience. There were unforeseen personal matters. However, I can assure you the acquisition plan remains solid." He listened for a moment, gaze drifting to a corner of his desk where the ultrasound images were tucked in a folder, waiting. He'd brought them as a reminder, a tangible testament that overshadowed any business crisis. The investor's voice prattled on about concerns over the timeline, synergy projections, and profitability estimates. Usually Ethan could recite his corporate pitch with unflappable precision, but today he just wanted the conversation over. "Yes, let's reconvene tomorrow at noon," he said at last, scanning his schedule. "I'll be available for the entire afternoon if needed." After a few more assurances, he hung up. Leaning back, he closed his eyes momentarily. The day had barely started, and already he felt mentally drained. Yet, ironically, his mind kept flitting to Sophie's face, how her eyes lit with cautious hope when he offered reassurance. He pictured her hand on her belly, bridging the gap between them and the unborn children who'd soon share his last name. Maybe. A knock at his office door made him glance up. His assistant, Julia, stepped in. She was a meticulous woman in her 40s, hair pinned back in a tidy bun, an iPad clutched to her side like a shield. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, tone crisp, "the board is assembled in the conference room. They'd like to hear your updated strategy for the overseas partnership, and they're concerned about the investors' confusion." He exhaled, glancing at the time. 11:30 a.m. If he took the board meeting, then another investor call or two, he might be cutting it dangerously close to the 4 p.m. appointment. "All right, let's keep it short," he said. 30 minutes, no more. We'll finalize the necessary points and I'll handle the rest tomorrow." Julia's brow lifted slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes at his uncharacteristic brevity, but she merely nodded. "I'll let them know." Within minutes, Ethan was in the glass-walled conference room facing a half-circle of impeccably dressed board members. Normally, he thrived in this environment, dissecting charts, fielding tough questions, flashing his trademark confidence, but he found his focus sliding. At one point, he caught himself tapping his pen impatiently while the CFO droned on about operational expenses. He forced a smile, bridging a quick solution that satisfied the group, all the while counting the minutes until he could leave. When the meeting finally adjourned, it was nearly 1 o'clock. He hurried back to his office, ignoring small talk from a few colleagues hoping to corner him on side projects. Once safely inside, he checked his phone. A message from Sophie. "All good here. Thanks again for letting me rest." Excited and a little nervous for 4 p.m. Something about her message made him grin. He typed a quick reply. "Doing everything I can to finish up. See you soon. Don't worry. You and the twins are top priority." Julia tapped at the door, poking her head in again. "There's a lunch scheduled with a potential partner from Tokyo. He's been waiting." Ethan sighed inwardly. The Tokyo deal was a cornerstone of the upcoming merger, a big reason he'd been traveling so extensively. "Reschedule," he said, swallowing the tension that rose at the thought of another disappointed partner. "Tell him I had an urgent personal matter. Apologize and let's aim for tomorrow." Julia's eyes flickered wide, though she quickly masked her surprise. "Understood, sir. I'll convey that." He exhaled once she left, ignoring the guilt nibbling at his mind. There was no easy equilibrium between fatherhood and corporate obligations, but he knew which side weighed heavier on his conscience right now. If the cost was a few upset executives, then so be it. Time slipped by in a whirlwind of short calls and brisk emails. Ethan delegated as much as he could, resisting the usual urge to micromanage. At 2:30, he stuffed a few documents into his briefcase, then grabbed his suit jacket. He refused to be late for Sophie, and the traffic at that hour could be unpredictable. Just before he stepped out, he paused to glance at the ultrasound folder on his desk. On impulse, he slipped it under his arm, wanting to have them if the doctor asked or if Sophie needed a reference. It was strange how quickly those little images had come to symbolize something precious, a pivot from the unstoppable force of business to a fragile, beautiful new reality. He left his office, bypassing staff who might clamor for last-minute updates, and headed for the elevator. In the sleek, mirrored walls of the lift, he caught his reflection, a man used to exuding control, now wrestling with an uncharted territory of fatherhood. But rather than fear, he felt a flicker of conviction. He would give this new life his best, no matter how tangled it got. At the ground floor, he slid into his waiting car and directed the driver toward Dr. Davies's clinic. As they merged into city traffic, he leaned back, adrenaline thrumming through him in a way no board meeting had ever matched. Because for once, he wasn't simply forging a corporate empire. He was forging a bond that felt infinitely more meaningful. And in the swirl of midday traffic, heading off to an appointment for his unborn twins, Ethan found an unexpected sense of purpose that no spreadsheet or contract could replicate. The waiting room of Dr. Davies' clinic looked like many other medical offices. Generic nature prints framed on the walls, a small table piled with outdated magazines, and a children's play area with plastic chairs and a few scattered toys. But to Sophie it felt strangely comforting. She'd been coming here since she first discovered she was pregnant, forming a quiet routine with each visit. Now, however, everything was different. Today, she wasn't alone. She hovered near the reception desk, checking in with the smiling attendant. Her heart thudded a bit harder than usual, anticipating Ethan's arrival. Despite her friend Ava's reassurance, Sophie couldn't shake the underlying fear that somehow this appointment might overwhelm him, that he'd glimpse the reality of a high-risk twin pregnancy and reconsider everything. Once done at the front desk, she chose a corner seat away from the door, hoping to maintain some privacy in case her soon-to-be famous companion attracted attention. She rested her hand lightly on her belly. The twins had been particularly active that morning, as though sensing her nerves. 10 minutes ticked by, no sign of Ethan. She fiddled with her phone, glancing over messages from Ava, who'd sent a barrage of encouraging texts. Sophie forced herself to inhale slowly, counting the seconds to calm her racing thoughts. Another 5 minutes. She checked her watch. 3:57. A pang of disappointment flickered. Maybe it was unreasonable to expect him precisely on time. He was a busy CEO after all, but she'd let herself believe he'd show. At 3:59, the clinic door hissed open. Sophie looked up to see Ethan step inside, scanning the room briefly until his gaze landed on her. A knot of tension unwound in her chest. She rose to greet him, and he crossed over with purposeful strides, an apologetic smile tilting his lips. "Sorry," he murmured, lowering his voice as he drew close. "Traffic was heavier than expected. Plus, I had to sign off on a few documents before leaving. I didn't want to come running in mid-consultation." She offered him a soft smile of relief. "It's okay. You're here." He glanced around the waiting area, taking in the standard surroundings. "Have you seen Dr. Davies yet?" "No, not yet. They'll call me soon. Let's sit." Sophie gestured to the chairs near hers, and he settled beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking like a man struggling to reconcile corporate composure with the anxious anticipation of fatherhood. Sophie noticed how he tapped his foot lightly, a sign of contained energy. "You all right?" she asked gently, tilting her head to study him. He managed a half laugh. Honestly, I'm a little on edge. I've closed million-dollar deals without blinking, but this is new. Her expression softened. I feel the same way at every appointment. There's always a bit of fear that something might be wrong, but Dr. Davies is good, and usually it's just routine checks. Ethan nodded, as if steeling himself for a board presentation. He reached into his briefcase, retrieving the ultrasound folder. Thought I'd bring these in case the doctor wanted to reference them. Sophie's heart twinged at the gesture. He was actually taking this seriously, and it meant more than she could articulate. She touched the corner of the folder lightly. "Thank you," she murmured. Before they could say anything more, a nurse in pale blue scrubs emerged from the hallway. "Ms. LeBlanc?" she called. Sophie rose, Ethan right beside her. As they approached, the nurse's eyes flicked curiously to him, then to Sophie's belly. She didn't pry, though. Her tone remained polite. "Dr. Davies is ready for you." They followed the nurse down a corridor to an exam room, where Dr. Davies, a mild-mannered man in his early 50s with graying hair and a calming demeanor, stood reviewing some notes on a tablet. He looked up, greeting Sophie with a warm smile. "Sophie, good to see you." Then his gaze shifted to Ethan, noting the purposeful way he accompanied her. A flicker of recognition sparked, but Dr. Davies remained professional. "And you must be—" Ethan extended a hand, his voice measured. "Ethan Montgomery, sir. The twins' father. Pleasure to meet you." Dr. Davies's eyebrows lifted only slightly, but his welcoming grin stayed in place. "A pleasure indeed. Sophie's spoken about you in general terms. Nice to finally meet. Let's get started, shall we?" Sophie perched on the exam table, and Ethan sat in a chair near her. The nurse took Sophie's blood pressure and weight while Dr. Davies asked routine questions about her symptoms, diet, and recent discomforts. She answered truthfully, mentioning fatigue and occasional dizziness, aware that Ethan listened intently to every word. Next came the moment that always set Sophie's heart racing: the ultrasound. Dr. Davies dimmed the lights, and the nurse helped Sophie recline, lifting her shirt to expose her belly. The cold gel made her flinch slightly as the ultrasound wand settled into place. Then, on a wall-mounted monitor, shapes began to appear in black and white. Ethan shifted forward, knuckles whitening as he grasped the arms of his chair. Sophie kept her gaze on the screen, hardly daring to breathe until the faint flicker of heartbeats materialized, two distinct rhythms pulsing in tandem. "That's baby A," Dr. Davies said gently, moving the wand. "And here's baby B. Both appear to be doing well. Good heart rates, good size for this stage. You can see their little profiles. Here, if we angle just right." The doctor tapped a key, and the image froze. Ethan exhaled, eyes fixated on the screen. Sophie risked a glance at him. His expression was intense, something akin to awe and a dash of fear. She bit back a surge of emotion, recalling how she'd made this journey alone until now. Having him at her side, witnessing these fragile lives moving on screen, made her chest tighten with gratitude. She couldn't help the tear that slipped down her cheek, but she kept silent, letting the moment speak for itself. Dr. Davies pointed out limbs and told them the approximate weight of each baby, explaining that twins often run a bit smaller than singletons but seemed proportional so far. He noted that they were fraternal twins, each in its own sack, which minimized certain risks. Sophie snuck another peek at Ethan. She saw his throat bob in a swallow. Finally, he cleared his throat, voice low. They look so real," he whispered. A laugh slipped out, tinged with disbelief. "That sounds stupid, but in the pictures you gave me, it was a bit abstract. Here, it's happening." Sophie squeezed his hand lightly. Dr. Davies smiled, accustomed to seeing these reactions from new parents. "They do have a knack for making things real, yes." After taking measurements and printing a few images for Sophie, the doctor helped her sit up. The nurse wiped away the gel and Sophie tugged her shirt back down, heart still fluttering. Ethan leaned closer to Dr. Davies. Sophie mentioned this is considered high risk. Are there complications we should be aware of? Dr. Davies folded his arms thoughtfully. Twins naturally carry extra risk, Mr. Montgomery. There's more strain on Sophie's body. But as of now, the babies look healthy. Her blood pressure's a bit elevated, so we'll keep an eye on that. She may need extra rest and possibly more frequent checkups. The key is careful monitoring and managing stress. If we catch any warning signs early, we can handle them. Ethan nodded, a frown tugging at his brows. I want to ensure she has the best care possible. If we need additional tests or specialists, I'll cover it. Whatever's necessary. Sophie flushed, not wanting Dr. Davies to think she was suddenly relying on Ethan's money for special treatment. But the doctor simply nodded calmly. Of course, we can schedule more frequent ultrasounds and stress tests in the later months. Beyond that, Sophie should watch her diet, stay hydrated, and avoid heavy lifting or overexertion. Sophie grimaced slightly. I, had planned to work on a small design project soon, but it might involve a lot of standing and moving materials around. The doctor tilted his head. You can still be active, but pace yourself. If you notice dizziness or swelling, take breaks. Maybe get a friend or hire someone to handle the heavier tasks. Twins leave less margin for pushing yourself. Ethan's hand tightened on Sophie's shoulder. We can figure that out, he murmured, meeting her gaze. No reason for you to strain. We'll get help. Heat rose in her cheeks, both grateful and a bit self-conscious at the speed with which he volunteered solutions. Dr. Davies cleared his throat tactfully, returning attention to the notes on his tablet. I'll schedule the next appointment for 2 weeks from now, given it's a twin pregnancy. Sophie, if you feel off before then, call us immediately, or if needed, the emergency line. With that, the doctor offered them a warm smile and promised to be in touch. As they stepped out, the nurse handed Sophie some updated ultrasound prints, each showing the fuzzy outlines of the babies. Ethan gazed at them as if seeing treasure. That was... he began once they were back in the hallway, but he trailed off. His eyes flicked to her belly again. She smiled softly. Yeah, it's emotional, isn't it? They exited into the waiting room, which now had a few new expectant mothers and a father trying to entertain a toddler with crayons. Sophie felt a flicker of recognition. This was a shared journey. She and Ethan had just joined a vast tapestry of parents learning to navigate pregnancy, though their story might be more complicated than most. Outside, the late afternoon sun hovered low, bathing the sidewalks in a warm glow. Ethan guided her gently to his parked car. He held the door open for her, and she paused before ducking inside, looking up at him. I know you have lots of important meetings, she ventured, her voice quiet. So thank you for coming. It meant a lot to have you there. His lips curved in a tender smile, something she rarely saw in him. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. He hesitated, then added, I can't quite describe how it felt seeing them move on that screen. The idea of having children, plural, was theoretical until now. That was, powerful. She nodded, heart swelling. I'm glad you got to see them. He climbed into the driver's seat. Perhaps he'd told his chauffeur to take the day off, and started the ignition. The city traffic was beginning to peak, but neither seemed in a rush. As they inched along, brake lights flickering in front of them, Ethan turned to her. How about some dinner? He asked. We can talk over next steps, any concerns you have, unless you'd rather rest. She glanced at the fading day. A wave of weariness did brush over her, but the idea of a quiet dinner together, sorting out the future, felt strangely comforting. Dinner sounds nice, she admitted. Something not too fancy, please. His grin held genuine warmth. I know a place. Casual, good food. We can slip in quietly without a fuss. And so the car merged into the flow of evening traffic, carrying them forward. Sophie rested her head against the seat. letting the hum of the engine and the comforting knowledge of Ethan's presence ease her. Today, she realized, was the first time she felt a tangible sense that they were becoming a team. It didn't erase the uncertainties, but it gave her hope. Outside the window, streetlights flickered awake, illuminating a path forward, one they would navigate step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. And for the first time, Sophie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they really would figure it all out. Evening draped the city in a gentle glow by the time Ethan pulled the car into a discreet side street. The establishment he'd chosen was tucked away from the usual bustle, a low-key bistro with potted plants framing the entrance. Soft, ambient lights and rustic wooden panels lent the place a cozy warmth. Sophie glanced at the sign above the door, which simply read, Bellows. From the outside, it appeared modest and unassuming, yet she could sense a quiet charm that beckoned her inside. She was thankful Ethan had opted for something more casual. The thought of an upscale restaurant with paparazzi lurking, or a stiff 5-course meal, would have been overwhelming. He parked carefully, then circled around to open her door. The sidewalk smelled faintly of herbs, perhaps from the pots scattered along the bistro's front windowsill. As they entered, a hostess greeted them with a polite nod, leading them toward a small candle-lit table near the back, away from the main flow of customers. Sophie settled into her chair, a soft sigh escaping as she relaxed. The day's stress still hummed at the edges of her consciousness, but sitting here, amid the low murmur of conversation and the tantalizing aroma of fresh ingredients, she felt a bit of peace seep in. Ethan, across from her, slid the menu into her hands. "The pasta here is supposed to be great," he said quietly. "A friend recommended it for times when I need a place less in the spotlight." She smiled. "It feels welcoming." "Thank you." She traced a finger down the menu options, grateful that her appetite was returning. "I see they have gnocchi with pesto. That sounds perfect." He set his own menu aside, nodding in approval. "I'll get the same. I don't mind a simpler meal tonight." When the server arrived, a middle-aged man with a warm smile, they both ordered, along with some mineral water and a small appetizer to share. Sophie leaned back, hands resting lightly against her belly, which had begun sending gentle, restless kicks. She wondered if the twins somehow smelled the food or sensed her shifting emotions. Ethan caught her slight wince as another nudge from inside jabbed her ribs. "Everything okay?" he asked softly, concern knitting his brow. She managed a reassuring smile. "They're active, that's all. It's fine. I guess they're hungry too." He nodded, though his eyes remained watchful, as if trying to discern any hidden discomfort she might be suppressing. "I'm still trying to process everything," he admitted after a beat of silence. "Seeing the ultrasound today, hearing their heartbeats, I keep picturing it in my head." Sophie's gaze lowered to her water glass. "It's pretty incredible, right? When I first heard their heartbeats, I couldn't stop crying. It makes it all so real." A small laugh, tinged with awe, escaped him. "I feel like I'm walking through a new world. My life has always revolved around business, target dates, projections, expansions, but this is personal, and there's no blueprint to follow." She nodded, empathy glimmering in her eyes. "No blueprint for me either, but at least we can figure it out together. We're both in new territory." He leaned in, elbows resting on the table's edge. A candle flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on his face. "That's the part I find oddly comforting. I'm not alone in feeling lost. If we just keep communicating openly, honestly, I think we stand a chance of doing right by the twins." Sophie exhaled, relief mingling with a gentle warmth at his words. She wasn't naive. She understood that sincerity now didn't guarantee a smooth road later. But it mattered that he wanted to try. "Thank you," she murmured, voice soft. "I know I keep saying it, but it's such a relief having you involved." Their server returned, placing a basket of freshly baked bread and a small dish of olive oil on the table. They both murmured thanks, and as soon as the server retreated, Ethan broke off a piece of bread and offered it to Sophie first. She accepted, dipping it in the oil, enjoying the flavor. After a few moments of companionable silence, Ethan cleared his throat. We should think about, well, living arrangements. Long term. I don't want you to feel pressured, but if it's easier for you to stay in the apartment or if you'd prefer somewhere closer to my main residence, we can explore options. Sophie chewed thoughtfully. Right now, the apartment is perfect. It's spacious, safe, close to all my doctor appointments. And you're right, it's nice not having to climb a million stairs. Eventually, though, she trailed off, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. Eventually, I might want to find my own place, something I can afford once I'm back on my feet with work. But that could be months after the twins are born. He nodded, not missing the faint note of her pride, an eagerness to stand on her own. Then we'll take it step by step, he said, echoing the approach they'd discussed before. In the meantime, let me make sure you're comfortable. I can't promise I'll be around every single day, my schedule is insane, but I want to be present. And once they're born, I'd like to see them as often as possible. Sophie's eyes shimmered with a mix of hope and emotion. That means a lot, Ethan, truly. He searched her gaze, voice softening. Also, I've been thinking about finances. I know that's a sensitive topic, but with twins, especially if you need time off work, I'd like to establish a fund, something that covers medical bills, any supplies, a small cushion for emergencies. It might mean less stress for you. She swallowed, feeling that familiar wave of gratitude mixed with uncertainty. That's extremely generous. I just worry about becoming a burden or making it look like I'm taking advantage. His eyes flicked up, steady and kind. You're carrying my children, Sophie. That's not an inconvenience. It's a shared responsibility. Let me do my part, and if it makes you uncomfortable, we can work out some agreement, or you can pay it back in the future if you really want. But please, let's make sure you have what you need. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. All right, she said softly. Thank you. I'll try to accept help when I need it. He acknowledged her acceptance with a silent nod, sensing how much it cost her to yield her independence, even temporarily. Over the rim of her water glass, Sophie studied his face, the strong set of his jaw, the lines etched by stress near his temple. She thought about how many nights he must have spent consumed by business deals, or how many personal details of his own life he had sacrificed to build his empire. A flicker of curiosity prodded her. Can I ask you something personal? He arched an eyebrow, a small half-smile forming. Sure. She set her glass down, folding her hands in her lap. Earlier you mentioned architecture, that maybe you'd have pursued that if not for your family business. Do you ever regret not following that passion? Or are you happy with the life you've built? The question seemed to catch him off guard. His expression turned introspective. No one's ever asked me that quite so directly, he admitted. He tapped a finger lightly on the table, pondering. I do love aspects of my work, creating opportunities, forging partnerships. But regret? Sometimes. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to design something tangible, something that stands for generations. My company builds deals that can dissolve with the market shifts. Buildings? They last. She listened intently, drawn to his rare moment of vulnerability. Maybe it's never too late, she offered gently. Even if you can't switch careers, you could still explore it as a hobby, or invest in architectural projects that align with your vision. A pensive glimmer entered his eyes. I never thought of it that way. Maybe one day I will. He sat back slightly, as if amused by his own confession. Funny how discussing fatherhood is making me reconsider other life choices too. Sophie reached across, giving his hand a light squeeze. I think parenthood prompts a lot of introspection. You start seeing your legacy in a different way." He nodded, lifting her hand for a brief moment and holding it in his own. The weight of this subtle affection hung sweetly between them before he gently released her fingers. Just then, their meals arrived. Bowls of gnocchi coated in fragrant pesto sauce garnished with fresh basil. They both exhaled in appreciation of the comforting aroma. Ethan thanked the server, then looked to Sophie. "Dig in," he said with a small grin. "You're eating for 3, technically." She laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing. "True. Let's see if the twins approve of pesto." Carefully, she twirled a piece of gnocchi on her fork, savoring the first bite. It was warm, rich, and precisely what she needed after such an emotional day. They ate quietly at first, but it was a comfortable silence. Each forkful seemed to melt away another layer of stress. After a few bites, Sophie glanced up to find Ethan watching her, smiling softly. She raised her brows in question. "Sorry," he said, not sounding apologetic at all. I'm happy. In a strange way. Maybe content is a better word. This is new for me." Her heart fluttered. "Me too," she whispered, returning his smile. "I'm glad we're here together, figuring it out." They continued with small talk. Ethan mentioning a comedic anecdote from his day, Sophie relaying a memory about her first time feeling the twins' kick. The conversation ebbed and flowed, carrying them toward a blossoming sense of camaraderie. As the candle on their table burned lower, Sophie stole glances at the other patrons, people chatting over wine, couples in quiet corners. No one seemed to pay them special attention, and that anonymity felt like a precious gift. Eventually, plates emptied, Ethan signaled for the check. Sophie stiffened slightly, remembering her earlier worries about finances, but he waved off her concern with a gentle shake of his head. "My treat," he said. "No arguments. Let me do at least this." She acquiesced, albeit shyly. Once the bill was paid, they stepped back out into the mild evening, a soft breeze brushing Sophie's cheeks. She felt comfortably full, both from the food and from the warmth of sharing the evening with him. He guided her to the car, again opening the door. Once inside, as he started the engine, she leaned her head back, hands folded over her belly. "Where to now?" she asked quietly, though fatigue laced her tone. "Home," he answered gently. "You should rest. It's been a long day. Besides, we've got weeks, months of planning to do. Let's not do it all in one night." She smiled, relief mingling with exhaustion. "You're right. Home sounds wonderful." The car merged into traffic. Neither spoke much, letting the rhythm of the city passing by and the hum of the engine fill the space. Eventually, Sophie caught the swirl of lights that signaled the apartment building. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she realized with a start how drained she truly was. Ethan parked in the underground garage, insisting on walking her to the elevator. As the doors slid shut and they ascended, she leaned lightly against him, the day's events spinning in her mind, the ultrasound, the doctor's reassurance, the simple dinner that felt more meaningful than any fancy gala. Each step with Ethan seemed to solidify her belief that they just might forge a stable life for these babies. At the apartment door, he hovered, uncertain whether to stay. "Do you need me to help you settle in?" he asked, voice hushed in the quiet hallway. She shook her head, eyes drooping. "I'll just slip into bed. You've done so much already." He nodded, stepping closer, his hand brushing her arm in a gentle, reassuring gesture. Their gazes locked. For a heartbeat, she wondered if he might lean in for a kiss, an impulse that sparked a mix of longing and hesitation, but instead he swallowed, offering a tender smile. "Get some rest," he murmured. "Call me if anything feels off. I'll check on you tomorrow." She mustered a response, though her throat felt tight. "Okay. Good night." He lingered a second longer, then dipped his head in a small nod and turned away. As she entered the apartment, the click of the door felt louder than normal in the hush. She sighed, pressing her back to the closed door, heart thudding. So many emotions had tangled that day: anticipation, relief, gratitude, maybe even an inkling of something deeper. Eventually, she pushed off the door, heading to the guest suite. Her body ached for sleep, and as she curled up on the plush bed, memories of the day floated in her mind's eye. The echo of 2 tiny heartbeats, the taste of fresh pasta, the warmth of Ethan's gaze. It all swirled together, promising that tomorrow held new possibilities she'd never dared imagine. The next morning arrived with a hazy sunlight drifting into Sophie's room. She stretched under the soft covers, blinking away lingering sleep. The events of the previous day floated back. Ethan meeting her at the doctor's office, the ultrasound images, the quiet dinner that felt more intimate than 1,000 formal gatherings. Even in her half-dreaming state, her heart lifted at the thought of having genuine support. Sophie eased out of bed, slipping into the slippers she'd found by the closet. The apartment was still and peaceful, and she realized she had no idea if Ethan was even in the building. He might have left early to wrestle with his corporate responsibilities, or perhaps he was asleep in one of the spare bedrooms, though her best guess was that he'd gone back to his main penthouse after dropping her off. Her stomach grumbled. She recalled the warmth of scrambled eggs he'd made the previous day and couldn't help a small smile. Slipping into the hallway, she made her way to the kitchen, deciding to brew some coffee, or at least decaf, given the doctor's advice about limiting caffeine. She rummaged through cupboards until she found a French press and some decaf grounds. As she waited for the water to boil, she glanced at her phone on the counter. A text from Ethan lit the screen. "Good morning. Had to head out early. Board emergencies. Let me know how you're feeling. I'll call you once I clear some things up here." Sophie typed a quick reply. "Doing okay. Making decaf. Let me know if you need anything. Take care." Then she poured the steaming water into the press, inhaling the subtle aroma. It wasn't the robust coffee she used to savor, but it was better than nothing. She thought about the conversation from the night before: plans, finances, living arrangements, and the way Ethan's expression softened whenever the twins were mentioned. It felt surreal, but hopeful. She had spent so many months picturing life as a single mother, soldiering on without him. Now that he was present, it felt like stepping onto firmer ground. Her phone vibrated again, this time a call from Ava. With a smile, she answered, cradling the device against her ear. "Hey, Ava." "Morning, Mama," Ava said, voice bright. "I wanted to see how yesterday went. Doctor's appointment, dinner." It was... Sophie paused, trying to encapsulate the swirl of emotions in a single sentence. "It was good, really good. He came to the appointment, asked questions, saw the ultrasound. Then we grabbed dinner. We talked about finances, living arrangements. He's taking all of it seriously." Ava practically squealed on the other end. "That's amazing, Soph. I'm so glad he's stepping up." Sophie poured her decaf coffee into a mug, leaning against the counter. "Me too. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop, but maybe it won't." "Don't sabotage yourself with doubts," Ava warned gently. "He's there now. Focus on the moment." Sophie took a careful sip of coffee. "You're right. I will." The call ended soon after. Sophie sighed contentedly, then busied herself tidying the kitchen. She started a grocery list in her phone, remembering Ethan's offer to stock the place. She might as well be prepared with a real list of healthy foods. Eventually, a wave of tiredness nudged her again. These twins, she mused, demanded rest at the most random times. She settled onto the living room couch, flipping through the art magazines Ethan had left on the coffee table. One featured modern furniture designs, another showcased bold architectural marvels. As she leafed through a spread on organic, sustainable building materials, she recalled Ethan's offhand mention about architecture. The idea that behind his corporate persona lay an unfulfilled passion struck her. Maybe one day, once the twins arrived and life settled, she could encourage him to pursue it in some way. The ring of the door buzzer interrupted her musings. Confused, she set the magazine down, heading to the intercom. "Yes?" "Sophie?" came a female voice. "I'm from the housekeeping service. Mr. Montgomery requested a cleaning and grocery restock?" Yes, of course," Sophie replied, pressing the button to unlock. She vaguely remembered Ethan mentioning that a housekeeping staff might come by. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a friendly middle-aged woman in a neat uniform, pushing a small cart with cleaning supplies and a couple of grocery bags. "I'm Magda," the woman introduced, offering a polite smile. "Just here to freshen up the place. And I brought some of the items from your grocery list that Mr. Montgomery forwarded. He said I should let you review it and see if you need anything else." Sophie blinked, half amused that Ethan had acted so quickly. "That's, great. Thank you. Please make yourself at home. I'm sorry if I'm in the way." "Not at all," Magda said kindly, glancing around the pristine apartment. "I'll just do a light dust and vacuum. Let me know if there's anything particular you want done." While Magda set about her tasks, Sophie busied herself checking the groceries. She found fresh fruits, leafy greens, yogurt, whole grain cereals, and a few boxes of herbal tea, exactly the sort of items Dr. Davies had recommended. A pang of gratitude swelled in her chest. She had never realized how comforting it could be to have someone else shoulder basic chores, especially when her energy flagged. She was placing the last of the produce into the fridge when her phone buzzed again. Ethan's name popped up. Instantly, her heart gave a little leap. She slid her finger across the screen. "Hey," she answered softly, stepping into the quieter hallway to avoid the vacuum's hum. "How's work?" A heavy sigh echoed through the line. "Chaotic. I had to appease a couple of major investors and the board about missed meetings, but I'm handling it." She could practically see him rubbing his forehead in that tense way he did. "Sorry," she murmured. "I hope I'm not causing you too much trouble." "You're not," he said firmly, voice gentler now. "This is my choice, Sophie. I can handle a few ruffled feathers. I just wanted to check on you. See how you're feeling today." She glanced at her belly as though the twins might wave hello. "Not bad. A little tired, but no dizziness or anything. Your housekeeper arrived. She's restocking, cleaning. Thank you for sending her." A small pause, then a hint of a chuckle. "Of course. I didn't want you climbing around cleaning or hauling groceries, especially with twins. Magda will handle most of it. Feel free to direct her however you like." "Understood," Sophie said, smiling into the phone. "Thank you. What about you? Are you going to bury yourself in the office all day?" "I'll try not to," he admitted. "I have one more crucial meeting this afternoon. Then I should be free by early evening. Maybe I can drop by, if you're up for it." Her heart fluttered. "I'd like that. We can plan next steps or just, I don't know, watch a movie?" He let out a genuine-sounding laugh. "A movie sounds nice, something I haven't done in ages. How about 7 p.m.? She agreed readily. After a few more words, they said their goodbyes, and Sophie ended the call, feeling a renewed sense of calm. The day stretched out before her, but it no longer seemed daunting. Magda finished cleaning soon after, placing new towels in the bathrooms and leaving a small note about contact details if Sophie needed anything else. By the time the apartment was quiet again, Sophie felt the tug of a nap returning. She decided to indulge in rest. There would be plenty of time to fuss over details and recheck finances later. So she nestled onto the sofa, pulling a light throw over her legs, letting her eyelids drift shut. Moments before she succumbed to drowsiness, she thought of Ethan's voice, the gentle concern laced beneath his steeled composure. It amazed her how swiftly they'd transitioned from near strangers to co-parents navigating daily life. The twins gave a mild kick, as if confirming they, too, felt the new harmony. Sophie placed her hand over the spot, smiling. Yes, things were complicated, uncertain, but for now, right now, they were okay. Outside, the city's bustle carried on, but within the apartment's tranquil walls, Sophie found a measure of security she'd believed impossible. She relaxed into the cushions and let sleep carry her, trusting that when she woke, there would be a man on his way who wanted to share her evening in the simplest, most comforting way, by simply being there. Warm, muted lamplight illuminated the apartment's living room as the clock in the hallway chimed 7. Sophie stirred from the sofa, blinking away the remnants of her afternoon nap. She smoothed a hand over her shirt, instinctively checking her belly for any sign of restlessness from the twins. They'd been calm, perhaps lulled by her rest. A gentle knock at the door tugged her from her thoughts. She stood, heart giving a subtle flutter. She'd grown used to seeing Ethan appear in business suits or crisp shirts, always exuding authority. But tonight, she hoped they could set aside the weight of schedules and decisions, if only for a few hours. Opening the door, she found him standing there in dark jeans and a simple sweater. His hair was slightly tousled from the breeze outside, and he clutched a paper bag against his side. The subtle shift away from his usual polished look made him appear more approachable, more human. "Hope I'm not late," he said, offering a small grin. "Traffic was surprisingly smooth, and I brought dinner, if you haven't eaten yet." Her lips curved. "You're right on time. Please come in." He stepped inside, glancing around. The housekeeping staff had left the apartment immaculate, and the soft glow of the lamps cast a comforting aura. "How'd your day go?" he asked, setting the paper bag on the coffee table. She closed the door gently. "Peaceful, actually. I napped. Drank some decaf. Got to know Magda, your housekeeper. She's lovely. How about you?" He exhaled, sliding his hands into his pockets. "More meetings, more negotiations, but I managed to keep them short. I told everyone I had an important personal commitment." Warmth blossomed in her chest. "I'm sorry if that raised eyebrows." He shrugged, giving a wry smile. "It did, but I don't mind. They'll get used to the idea that I have a life outside the boardroom." Then he nodded at the bag. "Since you mentioned how much you liked pasta last night, I swung by that bistro. I asked them to pack us a couple of simple dishes. Hope you're still in the mood for Italian." She couldn't help a laugh. "Never not in the mood. Thank you." They migrated to the dining area, which was quieter than the living room. A gentle glow from a nearby lamp illuminated the table. Sophie fetched plates, utensils, and water glasses, while Ethan unpacked containers of fresh pasta, one with a creamy sauce, one with roasted vegetables and a fragrant tomato sauce, plus a small container of salad. As they settled in, Sophie caught a glimpse of her reflection in the nearby window. She saw a woman who looked oddly content, despite the swirl of unknowns. She noticed how Ethan observed her too, occasionally letting his gaze drift to her belly as if in quiet marvel that the twins were truly real. Halfway through the meal, Sophie set her fork down, chewing thoughtfully before she spoke. "I've been thinking about something," she ventured quietly. "I might want to see if I can do some small design work from here, just enough to keep me busy but not to the point of stress. Maybe something remote so I'm not lugging heavy materials around." Ethan looked up, interest lighting his eyes. "That sounds completely reasonable. If you need a workspace or certain tools, we can set something up. I'd hate for you to feel idle, especially if it helps you keep a sense of normalcy." She relaxed. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I still have a few clients who asked about smaller commissions, like logos or digital mock-ups. That's easy enough to handle from a laptop." He smiled in understanding. "I can also introduce you to some folks who might be looking for design collaboration. My company has branding teams, partner agencies. We could find a way if you'd like. No pressure, though." Her cheeks warmed. She had to remember Ethan existed in a world where entire networks were at his disposal. "Let's see how I manage. But it's nice to know there are options." They finished their meal, chatting about small details, how she'd discovered a painting supply store near Dr. Davies' clinic, which new teas she might try for relaxation, and the merits of buying a better ergonomic chair for her comfort. All the while, a gentle closeness seeped in, forging a bond deeper than the uncertain romance they'd once shared in a single night. When the plates were cleared and leftovers stored, Ethan motioned to the living room. "You mentioned a movie?" He glanced at the large TV. Any preferences? Sophie sank onto the couch, feeling the plush cushions cradle her. Honestly, I just want something light. A comedy or family film. Something that won't stress me out. Ethan found the remote, scrolling through streaming options. How about this? He paused over a heartwarming animated movie about a lost animal finding its way home. Too childish? She shook her head with a grin. Actually, that's perfect. Let's do it. He pressed play, and the opening scenes bathed the living room in softly shifting colors. Sophie tucked her legs beneath her hand resting protectively over her stomach as the twins gave the occasional nudge. It felt so ordinary, yet extraordinary at the same time to share this simplest of domestic rituals, watching a movie side by side. About 30 minutes in, the movie took on a comedic tone, eliciting soft laughter from both of them. Sophie noticed how Ethan's posture grew more relaxed the longer they sat. The lines of tension around his eyes eased. For all his power and responsibilities, he looked almost boyish in the flickering glow of the screen. At a particularly silly scene, Sophie couldn't stifle a giggle. She glanced over to see Ethan watching her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He reached out gently, letting his fingers skim over hers. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice low and warm. She nodded, a flutter of emotion rising in her chest. "Just, everything feels surreal, in a good way," she confessed. "A few days ago, I was alone, terrified about the future. Now I'm sitting here, laughing with the father of my kids, feeling safe." He squeezed her hand lightly. "I'm glad you do, and I promise, I'm not going anywhere." Silence settled between them, but it was a comfortable hush, each acknowledging the fragile trust they were building. The movie continued, and Sophie felt the twins shift again, a more pronounced movement that made her inhale sharply. Ethan sat up, alert. "You all right? Is it—" She guided his hand to the spot on her abdomen. "They're really active right now. Maybe the laughter woke them up." His fingers splayed gently over her belly, and a look of awe filled his eyes. Another tiny thump rose from within as if the babies were greeting him. He let out a breathy laugh, equal parts wonder and disbelief. "I can feel that," he whispered. "I can actually feel them." Sophie's eyes prickled with tears. She'd felt them kick countless times, but sharing it with Ethan ignited a fresh wave of emotion. "They're saying hello, I guess." His hand lingered, absorbing each delicate push, his face reflecting a rare tenderness. "Hey there," he said softly, addressing the twins with a kind of hesitant reverence. "I'm your dad. Glad to meet you." A tear slipped down Sophie's cheek, though she was smiling. She'd feared so many times that he'd be distant or dismissive, yet he was nothing of the sort. In that moment, all her anxieties seemed to melt away, replaced by a fierce gratitude that this man was truly here, truly present. Eventually the babies calmed, or perhaps they drifted off. Ethan let his hand lower, but he stayed close. Sophie realized the movie's end credits were rolling, though neither of them had paid attention for the last few scenes. He rubbed his neck as though embarrassed by how deeply the moment had moved him. "Well," he said quietly, "that was an unexpected bonus to a movie night." She chuckled, dabbing at her cheeks. "I'd say so. Those two have good timing, apparently." They stared at one another, 1,000 unspoken thoughts rippling between them. Finally, Ethan roused himself from the intensity. "So," he ventured, voice turning practical, "tomorrow I'm heading to the office, but after lunch I'd like to meet with a financial consultant to start that support fund we discussed. Would you want to come along, or should I just arrange everything for you?" Sophie considered it. "Maybe I should be there, so it's in my name too. I need to understand how it works." He nodded, clearly pleased. "Exactly, I'd prefer your input. We can keep it simple, ensure you have immediate access for any expenses that come up, especially medical ones. Her expression softened. Thank you, Ethan. It's still overwhelming to accept that kind of help, but I know it's practical. And I love that you're not shutting me out. You're letting me see how it all works. He curved an arm along the back of the couch, close enough that she felt the warmth of him. We're in this together, he reminded, quiet yet sure. A comfortable stillness fell. Outside, the city lights glittered, forming a backdrop to the remarkable shift in both their lives. Sophie inched closer, letting her shoulder rest against his. She felt his intake of breath, how it steadied once she leaned on him. At length, Ethan glanced down at her, dark lashes casting light shadows on his cheeks. I realize we still haven't defined us, he said gently. Beyond co-parenting, I mean. I don't want to push if you're not ready. But I do care about you, Sophie. Her heart stuttered. She'd wrestled with the same question. What did they call this closeness, this blossoming warmth that transcended a mere shared responsibility? I care about you too, she admitted. Maybe we don't need a label. Let's just keep supporting each other, see where it leads. He nodded, relief clear in his eyes. Agreed, no rush. The twins are our priority. If, along the way, we discover more, we'll face that together too. A gentle sense of peace washed over her, tinged with excitement for the unknown path ahead. That sounds good, she said softly. She sat there, tucked beneath his relaxed arm, content to watch the city glow. A swirl of emotions, affection, hope, a dash of apprehension mingled in her chest, but none of it felt crushing. Instead, it felt like an invitation to explore whatever lay beyond the next day, the next ultrasound, the next laugh they'd share. Perhaps they'd face stumbles, media scrutiny, corporate demands, health concerns. But at that moment, on a quiet evening in a softly lit apartment, they were simply two people preparing to welcome two new lives, forging trust and a tentative bond. Sophie closed her eyes, letting her head rest on Ethan's shoulder. His gentle breath warmed her hair as he held her. She felt the twins move faintly again, as though echoing her contentment. And in that gentle, silent communion, she realized they might not have all the answers, but they had a future worth fighting for. In the hush of that final scene, two near strangers turned co-parents turned something more. They discovered that sometimes the most unexpected journeys yield the deepest sense of home. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.